Hi, everybody. Super excited to be here today to talk about how we at Zinier are designing the future of field service. So by way of introduction, my name is Andrew Wolf. I'm one of the co-founders and the chief product officer at Zinier. And today, we'll just get right into it. I'm going to be talking about design thinking and how Zinier applies design thinking best practices to build consumer grade products that help field service organizations really position themselves for success. Now, before I get into the nitty gritty details of what is design thinking and how Zinier applies those best practices at our company, I wanted to start by addressing a fundamental question that will really help illustrate the value of design thinking. And that is, why are so many enterprise products poorly designed, right? I think we all recognize this. It's gotten better over the years, but for a long time, enterprise software products have really lagged behind B2C when it comes to delivering compelling, delightful, intuitive user experiences. And I think in industries that are that have been traditionally slow to modernize and to digitally transform, this is especially true, and especially true in the world of field service where Zinier operates. So why is this the case, right? Well, I think for me, the most compelling and single reason for the difference in design quality between a B2C product and an enterprise product comes down to who makes the purchasing decision, right? In consumer products, it's pretty simple. The end user, you or me, is also the purchaser. We can decide at any time to delete an app, to stop using it for any reason, if our needs aren't being met, if the user experience is poor. And for this reason, B2C software companies have really spent a lot of time evolving their design practice to focus on solving end user needs and problems and act as a differentiator for the end users. This direct relationship of user and purchaser isn't always there when it comes to enterprise software, and it's almost never there when it comes to field service products. In the realm of field service, the purchase decision is usually made by some combination of a business unit owner and procurement, and end users such as dispatchers, field technicians are often left behind and not thought of because at the end of the day, once a product is purchased, that organization or company really will force end users to adopt that product. Now, further exacerbating this issue is the fact that in field service, enterprise users are notoriously difficult to reach, making it difficult for designers to collect feedback and gain a better understanding of their needs and pain points. But I think by placing the needs of purchasers ahead of end users, enterprise software companies are really being short-sighted and missing a huge opportunity to differentiate. So, I think great design at the end of the day can help accelerate end user adoption and ultimately create product advocates out of end users. As Dropbox and Slack and other enterprise products have proven, product advocates can have a direct effect on revenue by demanding these products from the organizations and decision makers, right? At Zinier, this is really our goal and the driving factor behind our adoption of design thinking practices and bringing really the needs of end users to the forefront. So design thinking, what is design thinking? Really, at its heart, design thinking is a user-centered process for creative problem solving. It encourages organizations to focus on the people they're creating for and leads to, as a result, better products, services, and internal processes. In user experience design, teams often use design thinking to do better UX research, to do prototyping and iterating and usability testing, to tackle often undefined problems and uncover new needs and pain points of the end user. I think this framework here that I put on the screen really is 5 steps according to the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford, which kind of came up with this term design thinking. And it really consists of empathize, design, ideate, prototype, and test. And this is an iterative cycle that often isn't done sequentially. There's a lot of cyclical movement in this process, especially around the ideas of ideation, prototyping, and testing. We've also added a sixth step to this process, which we call measure, which is really focused on software products. In the beginning, what was interesting about the design thinking process is it actually wasn't originally deployed to design software products. It was actually a process that was used to solve problems and build physical products. But today, design thinking and its, I would say its processes have really been adopted by the best forward-thinking consumer product companies in the world to build software. And it's iterative in nature, and measurement when it comes to software is a really powerful tool, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So the first step of this process, empathize. Now, this stage of the process is really about listening to users and really trying to get a deep understanding of their needs, pain points, and objectives, as in how do they measure their own success. Now, here, what you typically do is conduct user research. At Zinier, we do a lot of discovery workshops and ride-alongs and do things, build things like customer journey maps, and all of these techniques I think we'll dig into in a little bit more detail, but really critically important to understand and empathize with the end users that you're building products for. So how do we do this? I think one of the first things you do is fairly intuitive, right? It's to observe and interview users. I think nowadays with COVID, it's changed the landscape a little bit and made it a bit more difficult to get in front of end users. But meeting in person, getting out in the field is really one of the best things you can do to gain empathy firsthand. And it's really that firsthand observation that leads to a deeper understanding of those end users. So not relying on secondhand information to do this. I think some of the images you see here in this slide come from a trip that our team made to Vietnam to interview technicians. And it was a really interesting series of ride-alongs that we went on, where we were really just observing technicians and how they went about their day-to-day activities. Gained a lot of interesting insights. At this point, this company wasn't using Zinier, but we got to see how they actually operated on a day-to-day basis, what tools they used. They were using a lot of WhatsApp, a lot of Excel spreadsheets, a lot of pen and paper. And it helped us really gain a deep understanding of where were their problem areas in that process along their journey. Where could we step in and hopefully help them make their lives a little bit easier on the day-to-day job. That's user interviews and observations. Getting in the field is that first step. Couple of tips and advice for folks that are out there conducting user interviews. First, we like to find extreme users. And by extreme users, we like to think of the two ends of the spectrum. So new users, so new technicians, maybe newbies that have just joined an organization, as well as their really experienced counterparts, those technicians that have maybe been in an organization for 15 years and are really considered power users. And I think you find an interesting, I would say, difference in perspectives when you look at newbies and power users, and they can often give you really deep insights and uncover some of these interesting needs and pain points that occur at both sides of the spectrum. So when you're out interviewing these extreme users, these newbies and power users and everyone in between, one of the other things we like to do is we typically have a 2-to-1 interviewer to interviewee ratio. So what you really want to do is you want to have somebody who is asking the questions and another person that's really sitting back, observing, taking notes. And never try to have more than one interviewee in the room at the same time. What you're doing there is encouraging groupthink. And so really getting people one at a time is we found to be the best way of uncovering different pains and insights. Now, with the observations gained from user interviews, we like to put together what we call user journey maps. This is a fairly common technique, but really what this is all about is documenting our observations and creating a customer or user journey that maps out the different steps that they go through when using your product or when going through their day-to-day activities. And this is really about mapping out each step and identifying where the pain points and problem areas and where are the areas maybe where they're having success along this customer journey. And what this does is it really helps your entire team, frame the journey and gain a common basis for understanding your users. And so this can be used when communicating with developers, when communicating with designers. Everybody is starting really from the same page and the same basis of understanding. Now, I like to put this quote up here because interviewing is not only about asking users what they want. It's about observing, and it's about uncovering their fundamental needs and motivations. This is a quote that's attributed to Henry Ford. I think it's not actually by Henry Ford, but it's a well-quoted excerpt. And he says, if I had to ask people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So, right, like this really gets to the heart of the idea that asking users what they want isn't the same thing as uncovering their motivations and needs behind why they might answer that question. So it's really important to keep your eye on the fundamental needs and motivations behind what they're saying, as opposed to simply kind of adopting what they ask for into your product. Now, the next step, once you've gained a deep understanding of your users' needs and problems, the next step is really about defining specific problems that are worth solving. These definitions are called problem statements, and sometimes can lead to the creation of personas, and they really help keep you human-centered and your product defined within a framework that's really going to help these end users. When building software, it's critical at this stage that the entire team, your designers, product managers, developers, business stakeholders, be on the same page in terms of clarity and purpose. And that's also what that user journey map is all about, right? It's about getting everybody on the same page, understanding what the core problem is that you're trying to solve. And to do that at Zinier, we do a process that we call interlock, and we have a template for this. Here we're asking some really fundamental questions, such as what's the problem that we intend to solve for the customer? Which user or user persona are we solving it for? And what are the business metrics and success metrics that our customers and these end users care about? And how will we know if we've succeeded in solving their problem? And how do we measure that success, right? Again, the goal of this interlock process is to get everybody on the same page, and in terms of the problem you're solving, because ultimately, another famous quote here is from a pretty famous design guru, but he said, if you're only leveraging your developers for execution, you're only getting 50% out of them. And what's the idea behind this quote? The idea behind this is really that that all stakeholders involved, once they have an understanding of the problem at hand, can contribute to ideas and solutions. So it's really important to interlock at the beginning stages before going into solutions, so you can come up with better solutions and leverage your team in a better way. Okay, the next stage, ideation. So we've locked into a problem that's worth solving. The next step is really coming up with ideas and different solutions to the defined problem. And here, brainstorming is particularly useful. We at Zinier like to use a tool called Miro. That it's a digital whiteboard. It's particularly useful nowadays with COVID and people having limited face-to-face experiences. And so, ideation and brainstorming is really about putting every idea out there. There's no bad ideas when it comes to brainstorming. Put it on the board, help trigger some cross-pollination of ideas to come up with interesting solutions. And I think when it comes to ideation and innovation in general, diversity is so important. There are really no new ideas out there. Another quote, I'm quoting a lot of people today, but a very wise person once said that there are no new ideas out there. Every new idea is a combination of one or more pre-existing ideas. And this is where diversity of thought, diversity of background can have such a big impact. Diverse ways of thinking ultimately lead to interesting ideas that, when cross-pollinated and combined, can lead to innovation and an interesting combination of ideas. So diversity really helps lead to innovation, really at every company, especially for design organizations and product organizations. You really want to get a good mix of people from different backgrounds with different perspectives to help foster these new concepts, new ideas. Okay, next step here is prototyping. Again, this is a pretty straightforward process for us at Zinier. We like to build mock-ups that we can put in the hands of real users. We use a tool, as a lot of other software companies do, called Figma, a great tool for building interactive prototypes and designs. Again, the idea, how can we get some ideas out there and some visual concepts that we can put in the hands of end users before going into the development cycle? And that's really important. And it's really at this stage of the process that that it's important to note that you don't have to go for pixel perfection. And perfect is really the enemy of the good. This is a great quote from Voltaire. Spending too much time building a pixel perfect prototype can do a couple of things. One, it can lock your designers and your team into an idea too early. They've spent a lot of time building this prototype, building this concept. You don't want to have them locked into that concept, because we want to have the ability to be agile and to test multiple iterations. So do quick and dirty when it comes to prototyping, because you ultimately want to iterate as quickly and often as possible. And do this before you get into the development phase of the process, right? The goal here is to avoid technical debt by iterating and testing with users before you actually go into the development cycle. And that's really the next stage of the process, right? It's testing your hypotheses and solutions on real users to see if you've ended up solving the problem. So what we like to do is we like to take our prototypes at this stage of the process. We use another tool called Useberry for usability research. And this is a tool that allows you remotely to be able to test different solutions to different problems, to your problem statements, and get feedback using a web interface. So it's really cool. You can do this with both web interfaces and mobile to test different solutions to your problems and get feedback from real users. Second thing that's really important in this process, again, more interviews. If you can, do it face-to-face and get your prototype in the hands of technicians and other users. It can be extremely powerful to understand how they react to the solution that you presented. And so here, interviews is another tool in addition to kind of that online tool that we use called Useberry. And then I would say a quote from that I really love is from Mike Tyson. And the quote is, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." Now I put this up here because you can do all the planning, you can build lots of great prototypes, but ultimately at the end of the day, you won't really learn anything until you put these prototypes and until you put the product in the hands of the end user. You can have a great plan, you can have a solution that you think is going to meet their needs, but you really don't learn anything until you quote unquote get in the ring. So Mike Tyson, I think, says it best here. Okay, the final step of the process, and again, this is something that I think is not unique to software products, but where we have a unique opportunity with software, and that's in the measuring stage of this design thinking process. So measuring is where you really track user adoption, customer success metrics to gain an understanding if your solution is succeeding, right? So you could have firsthand knowledge from the prototyping stage that end users like your solution, but once you get it into the masses, it's the numbers and the analytics and your success metrics that are really going to tell you if the solution has been adopted and if it's performing in the field. So a couple of things we do in the measuring phase at Zinier. So one, call this feature instrumentation. So feature instrumentation is about tracking adoption, tracking different metrics across your product and across the features in your product. We like a tool called Pendo, but there's lots of other products in the market that can help you instrument and track metrics from user adoption to other success metrics that you can define. The other thing that's critically important, Net Promoter Score, and some people use CSAT or to track the general feeling with end users about your product. So again, Pendo has a nice tool for this that allows you to pop up an NPS score to track sequentially with different users how they feel about the product, whether they're detractors, whether they're promoters. So Net Promoter Score, I won't go into the specific details of what this is, but I think a lot of people use this nowadays to try and gain a deeper understanding of how well their product is doing with end users. All right, just a little bit of a summary here, on benefits of design thinking. So really, it comes down to three main things. Iterative and user-centered approach, this approach of design thinking, helps reduce design and technical debt, as we've seen. Getting prototypes in the hands of users before going into the development process can really help you, fundamentally decrease costs and build better solutions. Great design ultimately leads to user adoption and creating brand advocates. So again, getting out of that trap of only building for the people that you're selling for in the enterprise space, and instead thinking about design from the end user perspective, in our case, field workers, technicians, these deskless workers that are out there. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you create a great design, you can create brand advocates, which will demand your product from decision makers. And so that's the goal at Zinier, is to really create these brand advocates through design. And design thinking is a great way of doing that for us. All right. So that's it. Thanks everybody for checking into this webinar series, and we're looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into some of the different processes that I outlined here in some future series. So thanks so much.